he mocked the surrogate mother's poverty, until she revealed who the baby's father was. This is the story of Laura Martinez, a humble immigrant fighting to save her sister's life through a surrogacy contract. She faced immediate and cruel humiliation from the hospital staff and the father, Mr. Patterson, who judged her worn-out clothes and financial desperation. They tried to terminate her contract and dismiss her worth, unaware that the elderly woman who stepped in to defend her would uncover a secret about the baby's DNA that would shatter the Pattersons' world and change Laura's life forever. The rain was falling hard against the windows of St. Catherine's Maternity Hospital when Laura Martinez walked through the automatic doors, carrying nothing but a worn plastic bag with her few belongings. She was 7 months pregnant, her belly prominent under the cheap cotton dress that had seen better days. Her shoes, old sneakers with holes in the soles, squeaked against the polished marble floor of the hospital's main entrance. Everything about her screamed poverty, from her unwashed hair tied back in a simple ponytail, to the way she kept her eyes down, as if apologizing for her very existence. The receptionist, a woman named Patricia in her early 40s with perfectly manicured nails and an expression of perpetual boredom, looked up from her computer screen and immediately wrinkled her nose. She had worked at St. Catherine's for 15 years and had developed a sixth sense about patients. The ones who walked through those doors fell into 2 categories: those who could pay and those who would waste her time with insurance problems and payment plan negotiations. Laura clearly belonged to the second category. "Can I help you?" Patricia asked, her tone already dismissive before Laura even opened her mouth. "Yes, I have an appointment with Dr. Harrison," Laura said quietly, her accent revealing her Latin American roots. "My name is Laura Martinez." Patricia typed slowly on her keyboard, each keystroke deliberate and loud, as if she wanted Laura to know she was being inconvenienced. After a long pause, she looked up with barely concealed disdain. "I don't see any appointment under that name. Are you sure you have the right hospital?" "Yes, I'm sure. It's for 7 months prenatal checkup. I'm a surrogate mother for the Patterson family." The mention of the Patterson name changed nothing in Patricia's expression. If anything, she looked even more skeptical. "The Patterson family?" Patricia repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. "The Patterson family uses private suites and Dr. Harrison's exclusive services. I find it very hard to believe they would choose someone like you as a surrogate." Laura felt her cheeks burn with shame. She had expected judgment when she decided to become a surrogate mother. It was the only way she could make enough money to pay for her younger sister's cancer treatment back home in Honduras. The Patterson family had offered $50,000, an amount that seemed like a fortune to someone who had been cleaning houses for $5 an hour. But she hadn't expected the humiliation to start this early, in the hospital's reception area, with other patients watching. "I have papers," Laura said, reaching into her plastic bag with trembling hands. "The contract, the medical records, everything." Patricia held up a perfectly manicured hand. "I don't need to see your papers. I need to see proof of payment. Do you have insurance?" "The Patterson family is supposed to cover all medical expenses. It's in the contract." "That's what they all say," Patricia muttered loud enough for Laura to hear. "Then we're stuck chasing payments for months. I'm going to need you to fill out these forms and provide a credit card for any expenses not covered by your supposed agreement." "I don't have a credit card. I don't have anything. That's why I became a surrogate." The words came out before Laura could stop them, raw and honest, and completely exposing her vulnerability. Patricia's smile was thin and cruel. "Then I'm afraid you'll need to wait until we can verify your story with the Patterson family. Have a seat over there." She pointed to a row of plastic chairs in the corner, far from the comfortable leather seating area where other patients waited. Laura walked to the designated area, feeling every eye in the waiting room following her. She sat down carefully, one hand supporting her lower back, the other resting protectively on her belly. The baby inside her kicked, a strong movement that reminded her why she was enduring this humiliation. This baby, though not biologically hers, was her ticket to saving her sister's life. An hour passed, then 2. Laura watched as other patients arrived, checked in within minutes, and were called back for their appointments. Patricia would glance in her direction occasionally, always with that same contemptuous expression, but never called her name. Other staff members walked by, some casting curious glances, others deliberately ignoring her presence. It was 3 hours into her wait when a tall man in an expensive suit entered the hospital. He was in his late 40s with graying hair perfectly styled and a Rolex watch that caught the light as he moved. Everything about him screamed wealth and authority. He walked directly to Patricia's desk, not bothering to wait in line, and she immediately stood up with a bright smile Laura had never seen before. "Mr. Patterson, what a pleasure to see you. How can I help you today?" Laura's heart jumped. Mr. Patterson, the father of the baby she was carrying. She started to stand, ready to introduce herself, to explain her situation. But something in his expression made her hesitate. "I'm here because my wife is having some concerns about the surrogate," Mr. Patterson said, his voice carrying across the waiting room. He wasn't trying to be discreet. "We need to discuss changing the arrangement." Of course, Patricia said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Is there a problem with the surrogate?" "Several problems," Mr. Patterson said. "My wife has been doing research, and she's convinced that the baby's health is being compromised by the surrogate's living conditions. Poor nutrition, stress, probably inadequate prenatal care. We're considering terminating the contract and finding someone more suitable." Laura felt as if she had been slapped. Every word was a knife cutting into her dignity. She had followed every single medical instruction. She had given up coffee, alcohol, anything that might harm the baby. She walked 2 miles every day because she couldn't afford the bus fare, but she made sure to get exercise. She ate whatever she could afford, focusing on foods the nutritionist had recommended, even when it meant she went to bed hungry. "That's completely understandable, Mr. Patterson," Patricia said. "These people often don't understand the responsibility involved in carrying a child for a respectable family, like yours." Laura couldn't stay silent anymore. She stood up, her legs shaking, and walked toward the desk. "Mr. Patterson, I'm Laura Martinez. I'm the surrogate carrying your baby." Mr. Patterson turned to look at her, and the disdain in his eyes was unmistakable. He looked her up and down, from her worn shoes to her cheap dress to her unwashed hair, and his expression said everything about what he thought of her. "Yes, I can see that," he said coldly. "My wife and I have been discussing your situation. We have serious concerns." "I've been taking care of myself," Laura said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've been following all the doctor's instructions. I haven't missed a single vitamin. I walk every day. I'm doing everything right." "Everything right?" Mr. Patterson's laugh was harsh. "Look at yourself. You look like you've been living on the streets. How can we trust that you're providing adequate care for our child?" "I may not have much money, but I'm doing my best. This baby is important to me, too." "Important to you?" Mr. Patterson stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening tone. "This baby is important to you because of the $50,000 we're paying. Let's not pretend this is anything other than a business transaction. And frankly, Looking at you now, I'm questioning whether we made a terrible mistake." Patricia was practically glowing with satisfaction. "Mr. Patterson, would you like me to call Dr. Harrison? Perhaps we can discuss alternative arrangements." "That won't be necessary," a new voice interrupted. Everyone turned to see an elderly woman entering the hospital. She was in her 70s, dressed simply but elegantly, in a navy blue dress, with white hair pulled back in a neat bun. She walked with the aid of a cane, but there was nothing frail about her presence. She commanded attention immediately, and even Mr. Patterson seemed momentarily taken aback. "Who are you?" he asked, his tone still arrogant but with a hint of uncertainty. "I'm someone who has been watching this entire scene unfold with increasing disgust," the woman said. She walked directly to Laura and placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Are you all right, dear?" Laura nodded, not trusting herself to speak without crying. The elderly woman turned to Mr. Patterson. "I heard every word you said to this young woman. You should be ashamed of yourself. I don't know who you think you are, but this is a private matter," Mr. Patterson said. "My name is Catherine Morrison, and nothing that happens in a hospital named after me is entirely private." The effect of her name was immediate. Patricia went pale. Mr. Patterson's arrogant expression cracked. Even Laura, through her distress, recognized the name. Catherine Morrison was the founder of St. Catherine's Hospital, a philanthropist who had donated millions to medical causes over the decades. Her family name was on buildings across the city. "Mrs. Morrison," Patricia stammered, "I had no idea you were here." "Clearly," Mrs. Morrison said dryly. "Otherwise you might have treated this patient with the basic human decency she deserves, rather than making her wait for 3 hours while you fawned over others." "I was just following protocol." Patricia tried to defend herself. "Protocol?" Mrs. Morrison's voice was sharp. "The protocol is to treat every patient with respect, regardless of their appearance or financial status. This young woman has been sitting in that corner for hours while you've been chatting and gossiping and deliberately ignoring her." Laura couldn't believe what was happening. She had never had anyone defend her like this, especially not someone as important as Catherine Morrison. Mr. Patterson attempted to regain control of the situation. "Mrs. Morrison, with all due respect, you don't understand the circumstances. This woman is carrying my child as a surrogate, and we have legitimate concerns about her ability to provide proper care." "Legitimate concerns?" Mrs. Morrison turned her sharp gaze on him. "What I saw was a man publicly humiliating a pregnant woman because she doesn't meet his standards of appearance. Tell me, Mr. Patterson, have you read her medical records? Have you spoken to her doctor about any actual health concerns?" "Well, no, but—" "Then your concerns are based entirely on her appearance and your own prejudices." "She looks homeless," Mr. Patterson said, his voice rising defensively. "She's wearing rags. How can we trust that she's taking care of herself?" "Because appearance and character are not the same thing," Mrs. Morrison said. "But since you're so concerned about her living conditions, let me share some information with you. Laura, dear, where have you been living?" Laura hesitated. "In a shared room, with 4 other women. We each pay $50 a week. And why are you living there instead of somewhere more comfortable?" "Because every dollar I save from the surrogate payment goes to my sister's cancer treatment. She's 12 years old. She's in a hospital in Honduras. The treatment costs $2,000 a month. I've been sending everything I can." The waiting room had gone completely silent. Even Patricia had stopped pretending to work. Mrs. Morrison nodded. "And your prenatal care? Have you been attending all your appointments?" "Every single one. I have perfect attendance. Dr. Harrison can confirm that. I walk 2 miles each way because I can't afford the bus, but I never miss an appointment. Your nutrition. I follow the meal plan the nutritionist gave me. I buy the food she recommended. Sometimes it means I don't eat much myself, but the baby gets everything it needs. Mr. Patterson was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Mrs. Morrison wasn't finished. So, let me summarize, Mr. Patterson. This young woman is sacrificing her own comfort, her own health, her own dignity to carry your child. She's using every available resource to ensure that baby is healthy. She's doing this while also trying to save her dying sister's life. And your response is to humiliate her publicly and threaten to terminate her contract. I didn't know about the sister, Mr. Patterson said weakly. You didn't know because you didn't bother to ask. You looked at her clothes and made a judgment about her character. Mrs. Morrison turned to Patricia. And you're supposed to be the first point of contact for patients. Instead, you're a gatekeeper who decides who deserves compassion based on their appearance. Patricia was now visibly shaking. I'm sorry, Mrs. Morrison. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. You meant every dismissive word, every contemptuous look. That's the problem. Mrs. Morrison turned back to Laura, her expression softening. My dear, I want you to know that you have done nothing wrong. You have been treated shamefully, and I apologize on behalf of this hospital. Laura finally let the tears fall. Thank you, she whispered. Now let's address some practical matters. Patricia, you're going to immediately process Laura's appointment. Then you're going to ensure that she never waits more than 15 minutes for any future appointment. Is that clear? Yes, Mrs. Morrison. Mr. Patterson, you're going to go home and tell your wife that Laura is doing an excellent job. You're also going to amend your contract to include housing expenses. This woman should not be living in a shared room with 4 other people while carrying your child. Mrs. Morrison, I don't think you can dictate the terms of our private contract. No, but I can make sure this hospital understands that any patient, regardless of their status as a surrogate or their financial situation, is to be treated with the utmost respect. And if your behavior has caused any stress that affects this pregnancy, you will be held accountable. Mr. Patterson's face was red, but he nodded stiffly. Mrs. Morrison wasn't finished with her revelations. There's one more thing you should know, Mr. Patterson. Laura, dear, have you told them about the baby's father? Laura looked confused. The baby's father? Mr. Patterson is the father. His sperm was used with his wife's egg. Mrs. Morrison smiled gently. That's what you were told. But I've been doing some investigation since I first heard about your situation. You see, I have connections at every fertility clinic in this city, and I made some calls. Mr. Patterson's expression changed from defensive to alarmed. What are you talking about? The fertility clinic you and your wife used had a significant error in their record-keeping. The sample that was used for the implantation was not yours, Mr. Patterson. The waiting room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Laura felt dizzy. That's impossible, Mr. Patterson said. We paid for the best clinic in the state. The best clinic that happened to mix up samples during a power outage last year. They've been frantically trying to cover it up, but I have documentation. The real biological father of the baby Laura is carrying is actually a different patient entirely. Who? Mr. Patterson demanded. Mrs. Morrison paused, and Laura saw something shift in her expression. His name was Michael Morrison, my grandson. The silence that followed was absolute. Your grandson? Laura whispered. Mrs. Morrison nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. Michael and his wife had been trying to have a child for years. They had stored samples at the same clinic. Michael died 18 months ago in a car accident. His wife died with him. I thought my family line ended that day." She turned to Laura, taking both of her hands. "You're carrying my great-grandchild, the only family I have left in this world." Laura couldn't process what she was hearing. "But the contract. Mr. Patterson paid for this baby. A contract based on false information," Mrs. Morrison said. "Mr. Patterson, you're not the biological father of this child. The sample mix-up means you have no legal claim once the truth comes out. Mr. Patterson looked like he might be sick. This is insane. We've been preparing for this baby for months. Based on a lie," Mrs. Morrison said firmly. "And given how you've treated Laura, I don't think you deserve to raise any child, biological or otherwise." Patricia had slowly backed away from the desk, recognizing that she had witnessed something that would change everything. Other patients were openly staring now, no longer pretending to look at their phones or magazines. "What happens now?" Laura asked, her hand protectively over her belly. Mrs. Morrison smiled warmly. "Now, my dear, we make sure you and this baby have everything you need. I'm going to take care of your housing immediately. I have a guest house on my property that's fully furnished and empty. You'll live there for the remainder of your pregnancy and after." "I can't accept that," Laura said. "It's too much." "You can, and you will. This baby is my family. You're carrying my family. That makes you family too. But my sister will receive the best cancer treatment available. I'll make the arrangements today. She can come here to the United States if necessary, or I'll send specialists to Honduras. Money's not an issue." Laura felt her knees weaken. Mrs. Morrison guided her to sit down in one of the comfortable leather chairs, the ones she hadn't been allowed to use before. Mr. Patterson was still processing everything. "So we just lose the baby we've been planning for?" "You lose a business arrangement that was built on false pretenses," Mrs. Morrison corrected. "But let me ask you something, Mr. Patterson. In the time since you contracted with Laura, how many times have you checked on her well-being? How many times have you asked if she needed anything? How many times have you treated her like a human being, rather than an incubator?" He had no answer. "I thought so. You wanted a baby, but you didn't want the responsibility of caring for the person carrying that baby. That's not parenthood. That's commerce." Patricia finally found her voice, though it was shaky. "Mrs. Morrison, should I call Dr. Harrison now?" "Yes. And tell him I'll be in the examination with Laura. I want a full health assessment, and I want to know exactly what she needs for the remaining 2 months of this pregnancy." As Patricia hurried to make the call, Mrs. Morrison sat down next to Laura. "I know this is overwhelming, dear, but I want you to understand something. You didn't do anything wrong. The people who judged you, who treated you as less than human because of your circumstances, they're the ones who should be ashamed. I just wanted to help my sister," Laura said through tears. "And you're a hero for that. But you're also going to be a mother, in a way. This baby will know that you carried them with love, even when you were struggling. That matters." A thought occurred to Laura. "But the contract says I have to give up the baby after birth. I was never supposed to have parental rights." Mrs. Morrison smiled. "Contracts based on false medical information avoidable. And even if they weren't, I would fight it. You've done everything right, Laura. The law will see that." Dr. Harrison appeared from the back offices, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He looked surprised to see Mrs. Morrison sitting in the waiting area. "Catherine, I didn't know you were here today." "I'm here because this patient has been waiting for 3 hours due to incompetence and prejudice. But we'll address that later. Right now, I want you to give Laura Martinez the best prenatal examination she's ever had." Dr. Harrison looked at Laura, and his expression softened. "Laura, I've been asking about you. Your appointment was scheduled for 3 hours ago." "She was made to wait because your receptionist decided she didn't look wealthy enough to deserve prompt service," Mrs. Morrison said sharply. Dr. Harrison's face darkened. "Patricia, is this true?" Patricia had nowhere to hide. "I was following protocol for patients without confirmed insurance. Her insurance was confirmed weeks ago, when the Patterson family set up the account. You had no reason to make her wait, except your own prejudice." Patricia had no defense. "We'll discuss your employment status later," Dr. Harrison said coldly. "Laura, please come with me. Mrs. Morrison, you're welcome to join us if Laura's comfortable with that." Laura nodded gratefully. As she stood to follow Dr. Harrison, she noticed that every person in the waiting room was watching her. But this time, the looks weren't contemptuous. They were curious, sympathetic, even supportive. Mr. Patterson was still standing by the desk, looking lost. "What am I supposed to tell my wife?" Mrs. Morrison didn't turn around as she answered. "Tell her the truth. Tell her that you treated a vulnerable woman with cruelty and contempt. Tell her that your child isn't biologically yours. Tell her that you have a lot of soul-searching to do about what kind of parents you would have been." As they walked down the hallway toward the examination rooms, Laura couldn't stop the tears from flowing. Mrs. Morrison kept a gentle hand on her arm, steadying her. "I don't understand," Laura said. "Why are you being so kind to me? You don't even know me. I know you've been walking 2 miles each way to every appointment. I know you've been giving up your own comfort to help your sister. I know you've been following every medical instruction, despite having almost nothing. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." The examination room was spacious and clean, with afternoon sunlight streaming through large windows. Dr. Harrison gestured for Laura to sit on the examination table while he washed his hands. "Laura, I want to apologize," he said. "I had no idea you were being mistreated in the waiting area. If I had known—" "It's not your fault, Doctor." "Harrison." "It is, partially. This is my hospital, my practice. Every patient should feel safe and respected here." Mrs. Morrison settled into a chair by the window. "The fault lies with the culture that has been allowed to develop. When staff members feel empowered to judge patients based on appearance and financial status, it reflects a deeper problem." Dr. Harrison nodded grimly. "I'll be addressing that with the entire staff, but right now, let's focus on you and this baby." The examination took almost an hour. Dr. Harrison checked everything: blood pressure, baby's heartbeat, measurements, movement. He asked detailed questions about Laura's nutrition, her sleeping patterns, her stress levels, her exercise routine. "Your blood pressure is slightly elevated," he said, "which is concerning but not surprising given the stress you've been under. The baby's measurements are perfect. Heartbeat is strong. Everything suggests a healthy pregnancy." "So she's been doing everything right," Mrs. Morrison said pointedly. "More than right. Despite her circumstances, Laura has managed this pregnancy better than many patients, with far more resources." Laura felt a wave of relief. "So the baby is okay?" "The baby is thriving. But I'm concerned about you, Laura. The elevated blood pressure could become a problem if you continue to live under stressful conditions." "Which is why she'll be moving into my guest house immediately," Mrs. Morrison said. "I'll have my staff prepare it today. Laura, you'll have your own bedroom, bathroom, a full kitchen, and a living space. There's also a nursery that hasn't been used in decades, but we can update it." "Mrs. Morrison, I can't—" You can. You will. This is not charity, Laura. This is family taking care of family. Dr. Harrison smiled. That sounds like an excellent plan. Laura, I also want to see you weekly from now on instead of every 2 weeks, just to monitor that blood pressure. I can't afford more appointments, Laura said quietly. You won't be charged, Mrs. Morrison said. I'll handle all medical expenses from this point forward. But Mr. Patterson... Mr. Patterson's contract is void due to the clinic's error. He has no legal or financial responsibility anymore, and frankly, after his behavior today, I wouldn't accept his money if he offered it. There was a knock on the door. A nurse poked her head in. Dr. Harrison, sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation at the front desk. What kind of situation? Mr. Patterson is demanding to see you. He's threatening to call his lawyer. And there are several other patients who have filed complaints about Patricia's behavior. They're saying they've experienced similar treatment over the years. Dr. Harrison sighed. I'll handle it. Laura, please rest here for a few minutes. Mrs. Morrison, may I speak with you privately? They stepped out into the hallway, but Laura could hear their voices through the door. Catherine, you're right about the culture problem. I've been so focused on the medical side that I haven't paid enough attention to how patients are being treated administratively. It's not too late to fix it, but it requires real commitment, not just policy changes. I want to do better. What do you suggest? Start by terminating Patricia. Someone who can treat a pregnant woman with such contempt has no place in a hospital. Then implement mandatory sensitivity training for all staff, and create a patient advocate position, someone whose only job is to ensure every patient feels respected and heard. Consider it done. And Catherine, about Laura and the baby, I meant what I said. That child is my family. Michael would have wanted me to take care of them. Laura heard the emotion in Mrs. Morrison's voice and felt her own eyes fill with tears again. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling the baby move. You're going to be okay, she whispered. We both are. When Dr. Harrison and Mrs. Morrison returned, they were accompanied by a social worker named Ms. Chen, a woman in her 30s with warm eyes and a clipboard. Laura, I'm Sarah Chen. Mrs. Morrison has asked me to help coordinate your care and your sister's treatment. Can we talk about what you need? Over the next hour, they discussed everything. Laura's current living situation, her sister's medical needs in Honduras, her financial situation, her plans after the baby was born. Ms. Chen took notes, asked thoughtful questions, and never once made Laura feel judged or inadequate. Okay, Ms. Chen said finally. Here's what we're going to do. First, Mrs. Morrison's staff will move you into the guest house today. Second, I'm going to coordinate with medical professionals in Honduras to create a comprehensive treatment plan for your sister. If she needs to come here, we'll arrange that. Third, we're going to set up a trust fund to cover your living expenses for the next year, so you're not stressed about money while you're pregnant and recovering. A year? Laura couldn't comprehend that kind of security. At minimum, Mrs. Morrison said. More if needed. Laura, I want you to understand something. This isn't about debt or obligation. This is about giving you the peace of mind you deserve. But what about after the baby is born? The contract says... The contract is void, Mrs. Morrison repeated firmly. But that doesn't mean we can't come to a new agreement. One that respects your rights and your relationship with this child. What do you mean? Mrs. Morrison leaned forward. Laura, you've carried this baby with love and care. You've sacrificed for this child. In many ways, you are a mother to them. I don't think that should end at birth. You want me to be part of the baby's life? I want you to be whatever you want to be. If you want to raise this child, we can discuss that. If you want to be an aunt figure in their life, we can arrange that. If you need time to figure it out, that's fine too. The point is, you have options now. You have power over your own life. Laura couldn't speak. For months, she had felt like nothing more than a vessel, a temporary container for someone else's dream. She had convinced herself that she couldn't afford to get attached, that the baby would never be hers, that her only role was biological and temporary. Now someone was telling her she mattered, that her feelings mattered, that she had choices. I don't know what I want, she admitted. That's perfectly all right. You have 2 months to figure it out, and I'll support whatever decision you make. There was another knock on the door. Patricia stood there, her eyes red from crying, her perfect makeup smudged. Mrs. Morrison, Dr. Harrison, may I speak with you? Come in, Dr. Harrison said. Patricia stepped inside, keeping her distance from Laura. I want to apologize to Laura and to both of you. My behavior was inexcusable. Laura didn't know what to say. The apology felt performative, motivated by fear of losing her job rather than genuine remorse. Patricia, why did you treat Laura the way you did? Mrs. Morrison asked. Patricia struggled to answer. I don't know. I see so many patients every day. The ones who look like they can't pay always cause problems. Insurance issues, payment plan negotiations. It's exhausting. I guess I developed a shortcut in my thinking. A shortcut that assumed poverty equals worthlessness. When you say it like that, it sounds terrible. It is terrible. It's also illegal discrimination. I know. I'm sorry. I've worked here for 15 years. I love this hospital. I don't want to lose my job. Dr. Harrison looked at Mrs. Morrison, then at Laura. Laura, you're the one who was harmed. What do you think should happen? Laura was surprised to be asked. I don't know. I just want to make sure it doesn't happen to someone else. It won't, Dr. Harrison said firmly. Patricia, you're suspended for 1 month without pay. You'll undergo sensitivity training and bias counseling. When you return, if you return, you'll be on probation for 6 months. 1 more incident of discrimination and you're terminated. Is that clear? Yes, Dr. Harrison. Thank you for the second chance. After Patricia left, Mrs. Morrison turned to Laura. You were very gracious just now. More gracious than she deserved. Everyone makes mistakes, Laura said quietly. I've needed second chances in my life too. That's a beautiful perspective. But don't confuse grace with being a doormat. You have the right to demand respect. Dr. Harrison checked his watch. Laura, I'm going to write some prescriptions to help with your blood pressure. Low dose, perfectly safe for the baby. And I want you to rest for the next few days. No walking 2 miles to appointments. Mrs. Morrison, can you arrange transportation? My driver will be available whenever Laura needs to go anywhere. I don't need a driver, Laura protested. I can take the bus. You could take the bus, but you don't have to anymore. That's what I'm trying to help you understand, dear. You have options now. As they left the examination room and walked back through the hospital, Laura noticed that the atmosphere had changed. Word had spread about the confrontation in the waiting room. Staff members who had previously ignored her now smiled and nodded. Other patients looked at her with recognition and respect. Mr. Patterson was gone, probably to deal with his own crisis at home. The waiting room had a different receptionist at the desk, a young man who greeted them warmly. Outside, a sleek black car was waiting. An elderly driver in a neat suit opened the door with a kind smile. This is James, Mrs. Morrison said. He's been my driver for 30 years. James, this is Laura. She'll be living in the guest house and will need transportation to medical appointments and anywhere else she needs to go. It will be my pleasure, Miss Laura, James said with a slight bow. Laura had never been called Miss Laura in her life. She had always been just Laura, or more often, ignored entirely. The small gesture of respect brought fresh tears to her eyes. The guest house was nothing like Laura had imagined. It was a small cottage on Mrs. Morrison's estate, surrounded by gardens with a view of a pond. Inside, it was beautifully furnished with comfortable furniture, a modern kitchen, and large windows that let in natural light. Michael lived here for a few years after college, Mrs. Morrison said softly, running her hand along the back of a sofa, before he got married and moved to his own place. I've kept it maintained, but it's been empty since he died. It's beautiful, Laura whispered. It's yours for as long as you need it. James will bring your things from your old room. Not that there's much to bring, I assume. Just some clothes and personal items. We'll get you more clothes. Maternity clothes that fit properly. And anything else you need. Over the next few weeks, Laura's life transformed in ways she couldn't have imagined. Mrs. Morrison was true to her word about everything. Laura's sister, Maria, received the best cancer treatment available, with specialists flown in from the United States to work with local doctors in Honduras. The improvement in Maria's condition was rapid and remarkable. Laura attended weekly appointments at the hospital, always accompanied by James, always treated with respect and care. Dr. Harrison monitored her blood pressure, which gradually improved as her stress decreased. The baby continued to grow and thrive. But the most significant change was in Laura herself. For the first time in years, she wasn't worried about money. She wasn't worried about where her next meal would come from or whether she could afford the bus fare. She could focus entirely on her health and the baby. Mrs. Morrison visited the guest house frequently, bringing books, baby clothes, and most importantly, her company. They would sit by the pond and talk for hours. Laura learned about Michael, about the joy he had brought to his grandmother's life, about the tragedy of losing him. He would have been a wonderful father, Mrs. Morrison said one afternoon. He and his wife tried for so long to have a child. They were about to start the surrogacy process themselves when the accident happened. Tell me more about him, Laura said. Mrs. Morrison showed her pictures. Michael with his bright smile and kind eyes. Michael graduating from college. Michael on his wedding day. Michael volunteering at a children's hospital, which explained so much about Mrs. Morrison's passion for maternal health. He was a doctor? Laura asked. A pediatrician. He specialized in treating children with cancer. He wanted to make a difference in the lives of families who were struggling, just like yours. Laura looked at her belly, thinking about the child inside her. A child who would never know their biological father, but who carried his genes, his potential, perhaps even his capacity for compassion. Mrs. Morrison, can I ask you something? Of course, dear. If I decided I wanted to raise this baby, would you be upset? Mrs. Morrison was quiet for a moment. Laura, I won't lie to you. When I first learned that you were carrying Michael's child, my first instinct was to want to raise them myself, to have that piece of Michael back in my life. Laura felt her heart sink. But then, Mrs. Morrison continued, I watched you. I saw how you protected your belly when Mr. Patterson raised his voice. I saw how you refused to compromise the baby's health, even when you were hungry. I saw how you walked 4 miles every day because you couldn't afford the bus. And I realized something important. What? This baby already has a mother. You. Biology is just one small part of what makes a family. You've already been mothering this child for 7 months. That bond is real and important. But the baby is your great-grandchild, your only connection to Michael. And you're the woman who's kept that child safe and healthy, despite impossible circumstances. Laura, I'm 74 years old. I'm not equipped to raise an infant alone. But you are. You're young, strong, devoted, and loving. Everything a mother should be. So you wouldn't fight me for custody? Fight you. Mrs. Morrison took Laura's hand. My dear, I want to support you. If you choose to raise this child, I'll be there to help. As a grandmother figure, an advisor, a financial supporter, whatever you need. But the child needs a mother more than they need a wealthy great-grandmother. Laura felt a weight lift from her chest that she hadn't even realized was there. I do want to raise this baby. I know that sounds strange since I agreed to be a surrogate, but it doesn't sound strange at all. You've carried this child. You've felt every kick, every hiccup, every movement. Of course you've bonded. That's not a flaw in your character, Laura. That's proof of your humanity. Over the next few weeks, lawyers were brought in to sort out the legal complexities. The fertility clinic's error was documented and verified. Mr. Patterson's contract was officially voided. A new agreement was drawn up that recognized Laura as the baby's legal mother, with Mrs. Morrison having grandparental rights and responsibilities. Mr. Patterson tried to fight it at first, hiring expensive lawyers to argue that he should still have rights to the child he had commissioned. But when the DNA evidence was presented, and when his own wife learned how he had treated Laura, his case fell apart. Mrs. Patterson filed for divorce 2 weeks later, citing her husband's cruelty and his willingness to treat a pregnant woman as property rather than a person. 8 weeks after that confrontation in the hospital waiting room, Laura went into labor. It was 3 a.m. when her water broke, and she was terrified. But Mrs. Morrison, who had insisted on moving into the main house to be closer during these final weeks, was by her side in minutes. "It's time," Laura gasped. "It's time." Mrs. Morrison agreed with a smile. "James is already bringing the car around." The drive to St. Catherine's Hospital felt surreal. The last time Laura had walked through those doors, she had been treated as less than human. Now she was returning as herself, as a mother about to give birth, as someone who mattered. Dr. Harrison was waiting for her. "Laura, right on time. Let's meet this baby." The labor was long and difficult. 16 hours of contractions, of pain, of exhaustion. But Mrs. Morrison never left Laura's side. She held her hand, wiped her forehead, whispered encouragement during every contraction. "You can do this, dear. You're so strong. Just a little more." When the baby finally came, a healthy boy with a shock of dark hair and powerful lungs, Laura felt something shift in her entire universe. Dr. Harrison placed the infant on her chest, and Laura looked down at the tiny face, the small fists, the perfect features. "Hello," she whispered. "I'm your mama." Mrs. Morrison was crying openly. "He looks just like Michael. The same nose, the same mouth." "Would you like to hold him?" Laura asked. "May I?" Laura carefully transferred the baby to Mrs. Morrison's arms. The elderly woman looked down at her great-grandson with wonder and joy. "Welcome to the world, little one. You have an amazing mother who fought for you before you were even born. And you have a family who will love you forever." Over the next few days, as Laura recovered in a private suite that Mrs. Morrison had arranged, visitors came in a steady stream. Maria had been brought from Honduras, healthy and cancer-free, and she held her new nephew with tears of joy. Ms. Chen came with gifts and paperwork for Maria's permanent visa to the United States. Dr. Harrison came to check on both mother and baby, declaring them both perfectly healthy. Even Patricia came, though she stood nervously in the doorway. "I don't want to intrude," she said. "I just wanted to see if you were all right, and to give you this." She held out a small gift bag. Inside was a beautiful hand-knitted baby blanket. "I made it myself," Patricia said. "I know it doesn't make up for how I treated you, but I wanted you to know that I've been thinking about what you said, about second chances. I'm trying to be better." Laura accepted the blanket. "Thank you, Patricia. It's beautiful. What's his name?" Laura looked at Mrs. Morrison, who nodded encouragingly. "Michael James Martinez Morrison," Laura said. "Michael for his father. James for the driver who first treated me with dignity. Martinez for my family. Morrison for the woman who saved us both. That's a very big name for a very small baby," Patricia said with a small smile. "He'll grow into it," Mrs. Morrison said confidently. On the day they left the hospital, Laura walked through the same waiting room where she had been humiliated months before. But everything was different now. The new patient advocate, a kind woman named Jennifer, greeted every arrival with warmth and assistance. The waiting area had been redesigned to eliminate the separation between paying and charity patients. New policies were posted on the walls, emphasizing respect and dignity for all. James was waiting with the car. As he carefully secured the baby's car seat, Laura noticed several hospital staff members watching from the windows. Some waved, others smiled, a few wiped away tears. "They're all rooting for you," Mrs. Morrison said. "Your story has changed this place." "I didn't do anything special." "You survived with grace. You maintained your dignity when others tried to strip it away. You showed that character isn't determined by wealth or appearance. That's extraordinary." The guest house had been transformed into a nursery. The empty room was now filled with a crib, changing table, rocking chair, and every possible baby supply. Maria was there to greet them, having spent the day decorating with balloons and flowers. "Sister!" Maria cried, hugging Laura carefully. "I can't believe you're a mama now." "I can't believe you're healthy," Laura said, crying with joy. "Look at you. Your hair is growing back. The doctors say I'm in remission. They say I'm going to be okay." That night, after Maria had gone to bed in her own room in the main house, after Mrs. Morrison had said goodnight, after the baby had been fed and changed and settled, Laura sat in the rocking chair by the window and looked out at the gardens. She thought about the woman she had been 7 months ago. Desperate, poor, willing to sell the use of her body to save her sister. She thought about walking into that hospital, prepared to be judged, expecting to be treated as less than human. She thought about Mr. Patterson's contempt, Patricia's cruelty, the 3 hours sitting in that corner, invisible and dismissed. And she thought about Mrs. Morrison's kindness, Dr. Harrison's respect, the second chances that had transformed everything. The baby stirred in his bassinet. Laura picked him up and held him close. "Your daddy would have been so proud of you," she whispered. "He was a doctor who helped sick children. Your great-grandmother says he was kind and brave. You have his genes, little one. Maybe you'll be like him." She thought about the future, about raising this baby with the support of Mrs. Morrison, about her sister finishing school and maybe going to college, about building a life that wasn't defined by poverty and desperation, about the possibility of going back to school herself. Mrs. Morrison had already mentioned it, suggesting that Laura might want to study nursing or social work, that she had the empathy and strength to help others who faced similar situations. 6 months later, Laura stood in front of a classroom at the community center, looking at 15 pregnant women who had come to hear her speak. They were all surrogates or struggling mothers, all facing the same discrimination and hardship she had experienced. "My name is Laura Martinez," she began. "And I want to tell you about the day I walked into St. Catherine's Hospital in old sneakers and a cheap dress, and how that day changed my entire life." She told them everything: the humiliation, the waiting, the contempt, but also the kindness, the justice, the transformation. She told them about standing up for themselves, about demanding respect, about refusing to internalize other people's judgments. "You are not worth less because you have less money," she said firmly. "You are not worth less because you're struggling. You are not worth less because you need help. Your circumstances do not define your character." In the back of the room, Mrs. Morrison watched with pride. Beside her, James held baby Michael, who was now a chubby, happy 6-month-old with his father's smile. After the presentation, women lined up to talk to Laura, to share their stories, to ask for advice. Ms. Chen was there too, connecting them with resources and support. One young woman, heavily pregnant and wearing clothes that had clearly seen better days, approached Laura last. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I've been so ashamed of needing help, but hearing your story, it gives me hope." "What's your name?" Laura asked. "Sophia." "Sophia, listen to me. There is no shame in needing help. The shame belongs to people who judge others for being human. You're growing a baby. That's the hardest work in the world. You deserve respect and support." "I don't know if I can believe that." Laura took her hand. "I didn't believe it either. But I learned. And I'm here to help you learn it too. Here's my number. Call me if you need anything. A ride to an appointment, someone to talk to, help with paperwork, anything." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "Because someone helped me when I had nothing. And now it's my turn to help someone else. That's how we change the world, Sophia. One act of kindness at a time." As Laura drove home that evening, with Mrs. Morrison in the passenger seat and baby Michael sleeping peacefully in his car seat, she reflected on how much had changed in less than a year. She had walked into that hospital as a poor, pregnant surrogate, with no power and no voice. She had been judged, humiliated, dismissed. But she had walked out as a mother, a fighter, an advocate. She had discovered her own strength, her own worth, her own voice. "You're thinking deeply," Mrs. Morrison observed. "I'm thinking about Mr. Patterson," Laura admitted. "I heard he lost his business. His wife took everything in the divorce. Do you feel bad for him?" "A little. He was cruel. But I don't think he was evil. Just blinded by his own privilege and prejudice." "That's very mature of you." "You taught me that everyone deserves second chances, even people who don't deserve first chances." Mrs. Morrison laughed. "I'm not sure I said it exactly that way, but the sentiment is correct." They pulled into the estate just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The gardens were in full bloom, and the pond reflected the colors of the sky like a mirror. Laura carefully lifted Michael from his car seat. He woke up and looked at her with those bright eyes that reminded everyone of his father. "We're home, baby boy," she whispered. Home. It was a word that meant something now. Not just a place to sleep, but a place of safety, love, family. Maria came running out of the house. "Sister! Did your talk go well?" "It went perfectly. How was your day?" "I got an A on my English test. Mrs. Morrison helped me study." "That's wonderful!" They walked into the house together. This family that had been built not by blood alone, but by kindness, choice, and second chances. A wealthy elderly woman who had lost her grandson. A poor immigrant who had been carrying that grandson's child. A 12-year-old girl who had been given a chance at life. That evening, after dinner, after Maria had done her homework, after the baby had been bathed and fed and rocked to sleep, Laura stood in the nursery and looked at the sleeping infant. She thought about the question Mrs. Morrison had asked months ago in that hospital room. What do you want to be? At the time, Laura hadn't known how to answer. She had spent so long being defined by her circumstances, by what she lacked, by what she was willing to endure for survival. Now she knew the answer. She wanted to be exactly what she was: a mother, a sister, a friend, an advocate. Someone who had experienced the worst of human cruelty and the best of human kindness. Someone who could help others find their way from one to the other. The baby's eyes flickered open for just a moment, and he made a small sound of contentment before falling back asleep. "I love you," Laura whispered. "And I will spend every day making sure you grow up in a world that's kinder than the one I knew. A world where people are judged by their character, not their circumstances. A world where everyone gets the second chances they deserve." She thought about Mr. Patterson one more time, about how his prejudice had almost cost him everything, about how he had looked at her and seen only poverty, only inadequacy, only an obstacle. He had mocked her poverty, assuming it reflected her worth. He never imagined that the baby she carried was not his at all, but the child of a good man who had dedicated his life to helping others. He never imagined that the poor surrogate would become the mother of his would-be child, would become part of a wealthy family, would become an advocate for others like her. He never imagined that his cruelty would be the catalyst for his own downfall and her transformation. Outside, the moon rose over the gardens. Inside, a baby slept peacefully. A sister studied for school. An elderly woman read in her library, and a young mother stood guard over the life she had fought so hard to build. The world hadn't changed overnight. There were still people like Patricia at reception desks, still people like Mr. Patterson in positions of power, still countless women like Sophia struggling to be seen as human. But Laura had learned something important. Change begins with one voice refusing to be silenced, one person refusing to accept injustice, one moment of courage that inspires others to be brave. She had been that voice. She had been that person. She had had that moment. And now she would help others find theirs. Because in the end, that's what second chances are for. Not just to rebuild our own lives, but to help others believe that rebuilding is possible. The baby stirred again, and Laura gently rocked the bassinet, humming a lullaby her own mother had sung to her years ago in Honduras. "Duerme, duerme, mi amor," she sang softly. "Sleep, sleep, my love. Tomorrow is a new day. Tomorrow we change the world." And in that moment, in that nursery, in that house that had once belonged to the baby's father, Laura Martinez knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Not because of fate or destiny or some cosmic plan, but because she had refused to let others define her worth, because she had maintained her dignity when everything else was stripped away, because she had chosen love over bitterness, hope over despair, action over resignation. The people who had mocked her poverty learned too late that wealth is measured in character, not currency. They learned that the baby they thought belonged to them was never theirs at all. They learned that the woman they treated as worthless was worth more than they could ever understand. And Laura learned the most important lesson of all, that her value had never been determined by what others thought of her, but by what she knew to be true about herself. She was strong. She was capable. She was worthy. She was enough. She had always been enough. The world just needed to catch up with what she had known all along.